Hello everyone and welcome back to AustinPlus, where today we are talking about Loki, a Marvel character, because I don't do enough Marvel videos on this channel, clearly. Well, I actually did have a different video planned for this week, for today, but things went sideways. So you'll see why in just a few days' time. So stay tuned. But today we are discussing Loki because when Loki first appeared in the MCU, he was the ultimate villain, power hungry and manipulative and desperate for a throne. But after 2 seasons of his own Disney Plus series, he's arguably become one of the greatest heroes in Marvel or the MCU. Or has he? So today we are answering the question, has Loki actually outgrown, or has he ever outgrown being the villain or the main character in his show? Because someone said this to me, technically isn't he still the villain because he always wanted a throne and now he's got one? So that was he was playing the long game. So it got me thinking. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Loki we actually started off with is sort of different from the one we got in the TVA, but anyway, the Loki who enters the TVA isn't the redeemed version from like Thor Ragnarok or Infinity War, but he's the 2012 Loki who had just invaded Earth in the Avengers. He's arrogant, selfish, and still believes ruling others is his destiny, and this series begins with his arguably the most villainous version of Loki in the entire MCU. So I would say at this very moment, this is probably the most villainy you could go from. So that evolution in this show could be very different to the one that we actually were introduced to in 2012. Now, in the TVA, in the first episode, wherever it happened, he was forced to face himself as a person, as a character, and it was a whole idea of biggest themes of self-reflection. And I think that was the whole idea around the Loki shows, because I think they wanted Loki to come out as a hero, so they needed a show where he was basically reflecting on all of his actions and how could he be a bit better, while also introducing new characters. Now, through the TVA, Loki watches his own future, including his mother's death, his reconciliation with Thor, and his sacrifice against Thanos. But instead of slowly changing through years of experiences, he's forced to confront the consequences of his choices almost instantly. And his greatest enemy isn't the TVA, it's his self-conscious, it's himself. And I think Mobius was the best character to introduce him to that. And it created an arc of comparison throughout the whole of the first season. In the second season, he's utilizing that power he's got, and that he is attempting to be himself and help others after that reconciliation of self actualization and self consciousness. But now, this is where I think the importance of variants comes in, because as much as variants play a big role in the idea of the MCU at the moment, I think the variants do also show that villainous comparison to the evolution that this character has gone through. And I think it's like through meeting Sylvie, classic Loki, Kid Loki, and then the other versions that we saw, President Loki, Boastful Loki, I think it was, to really realize that every version of himself shares similar flaws, but also he has seen that this is what he would have become, this is what could have happened, and he's happy that this is the version that he himself has become. Now, most of them seek power, crave validation, betray one another, and often end in tragedy. Now, all of these actually correlate to a specific character type that the classic Loki from the comics would actually see. However, this version of the Loki, we don't see. This is very different. But these encounters challenge Loki's belief that his destiny is fixed, suggesting that he can become something more than just the God of Mischief and find his glorious purpose, which I think is a key theme that we're going to carry on through this very video. Now, manipulation, I think, is a key character arc in terms of Loki. But the question is, did he actually stop manipulating people in the show? I think that's a very good question, because as much as he did change, did he go back to his old habits? Although Loki becomes more compassionate, many of his old habits do remain. He continues to deceive, negotiate, and strategically manipulate situations throughout both seasons. Now, the difference is that these traits are increasingly used to protect others rather than serve himself. That's where that progression of evolution of character building happens. Now, his methods do remain recognizable to a Loki type, but his motivations gradually change. Now, one thing I want to pick up on here is that Loki is a mythological character. Loki is a mythological character from not Greek mythology, something along those lines, because obviously Thor is the god of thunder, Loki is the god of mischief. Those are things that we see in some sort of mythology. Now, that is, again, mischievous, like, manipulation, and all those character types do resonate with the same lore that you get from this character. Now, they've obviously put that in Marvel wrapping paper, but they've put their own twist on it. So to do that with one sort of character, I think is incredible, and that's why I really like the Loki show. I know a lot of people didn't like season 2, obviously because people wanted Kang, but then there was a load of shit show stuff going on. But at the end of the day, it was a Loki show. It's not a Kang show. The biggest, I think, battle and like arc from episode 1 to episode 6 of, I think there was 6 episodes per season. Yeah, from episode 1 to episode 12, the power versus purpose. You started off wanting power, you ended with a purpose. That is the biggest comparison that I think you can ever think of for a specific character. Earlier in the MCU, Loki wanted power because he believed in it would finally give his life meaning. Throughout the show, that desire slowly shifts, and by season 2, he no longer seeks the throne for status or recognition, but instead he accepts immense responsibility, purely to preserve reality itself. For the first time, purpose does replace ambition, and I think this is why I think his character will be so important in Avengers Doomsday. He is the person that found his purpose, and that is so important to Loki, and someone is trying to take it away from him, i.e. Doctor Doom. Now, I think Loki will maybe die. I do think Loki will die, but I do think Loki will die having served his purpose, and he will die like in a sacrificial way. Leading me to what I think might be the ultimate sacrifice. The series finale completely redefines Loki's character. Rather than ruling over people, he chooses to sustain every single timeline, knowing it means eternal isolation. Now, we saw that final big tree in, I don't know what it's called. I think it's like a combination of all timelines held together by Loki. By the way, those arms must be in so much agony just doing that all day long. But he created his own chair and all that inside the tree, so he's the one holding it all together. And then we also see that tree gradually in what is it? I think it's What If season 3 or What If end of season 2. I do think it's the end of season 2, I do believe, which is the one that came out in December. I think it's season 2, yeah. Yeah, so bearing in mind, people can see that he is the person that's holding it together, the Watcher, like everyone. Now, it's opposite of everything he once desired. Now, the character who once sought a warship willingly sacrifices his own happiness so that countless others can live freely. That is not a Loki type. That's quite the opposite. That's like an Iron Man sacrifice. That's why I think that Loki show has so much depth, and I think it could lead to him making the Iron Man sort of sacrifice in Avengers Doomsday, not in Secret Wars, or maybe Secret Wars, depending on how they do it. So, did he actually ever become a hero? While many viewers call Loki a hero by the end of the series, the answer isn't entirely straightforward. His intentions still remain the same, just in a different format. He never became the traditional noble character like Captain America or selfless from beginning like Steve Rogers was, but instead he remains morally complex, and I think that's arguably better than being a hero or a villain. His intelligence, unpredictably, and willingness to bend rules never disappear. They're simply just directed toward protecting existence itself. But did he actually ever truly outgrow being a villain? Yeah, whether you define villainy as like someone who is right, Masters of the Universe, Skeletor literally said, "I'm the villain. I'm going to do this because I am the villain." A villain can be someone who just trying to define a villain is hard, But this person had intentions, and while he came to those intentions and like goals, it would just happen in a different way. But those motivations to sort of help himself helped others. So I think that is not a trait of an antagonist or a villain-like character. He remains the cunning, sarcastic, and the manipulative character that he always was, but what changes is his reason for using those traits. Rather than obviously seeking personal glory, which he did in the end, he chooses to sacrifice responsibility for the protection of others. As I said, not the trait of a villain. The villain doesn't disappear, he just evolved into a protector, a guardian if you will. In many ways, yes, but not because he stopped being Loki. He abandoned his intelligence, his deception, or his ambition. He just simply found something greater than himself to fight for. And by the end of the series, Loki isn't defined by the throne he always wanted. He's defined by the burden he willingly chose to carry. And that's what makes his transformation one of the MCU's greatest character arcs to date. But that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe and comment what you would like to see on this channel. But I hope you have an amazing day as always, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye. Yeah.